Hi. Hello.
Hello.
All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi. Good to see you. Welcome to the Up at Noon Star Wars The Force Awakens spoiler cast. If this is at all unclear, it has been a week since Star Wars The Force Awakens came out in theaters, and I assume a great deal of people have gone and seen it. If you have not seen it, stop watching this video right now. We are going to talk about every little nook and cranny of that film.
Every weird little bit, every
watching.
background creature, everything. We're going to
blow
blow this thing open.
Movie, do not watch this.
Yeah.
We will put a thing that says spoilers along the bottom, and we'll leave it there. So just don't watch this.
Don't watch it.
If you haven't seen the film, unless you're one of those weird people who doesn't mind having this film spoiled, you should go see the film. If that's a spoiler, you're a weak person.
But for everybody else, Up at Noon is a show that Max and I do, usually in a very elaborate TV studio with big cameras and stuff behind us. Today we're doing something a little top secret. We are recording this the night after seeing the movie for the first time. And we didn't want to just ruin the movie for everybody in the building. We didn't want to get a full film crew in there. So if you like our sort of take on this, you can check out Up at Noon every Thursday at noon, although not the next 2 weeks because we're going on holiday break. But sometime in January we'll be back. It's a fun comedy variety show. But in the meantime, we thought we'd take a little corner of the world and just hide and talk about the hit film Star Wars The Force Awakens. Obviously, IGN does spoiler cast of its own. They do a much more official version. This is sort of street level. This is a little bit more laid back. We're going to get into the weird stuff, the weird knit grit.
Yeah.
Max, you and I, we've been Star Wars fans our entire lives. We all, for interest of honesty here, big fans of the original trilogy, obviously seen them hundreds of times. With Star Wars toys all over our desks, you have Star Wars tattoos. We both saw independently the prequels on opening night. Right. You know, going in there with open minds and heavy hearts.
You know, the prequels have some redeeming qualities.
Yeah.
They have some cool bits and pieces here and there. I think that in comparison to the original films, I think they plain out suck ass.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people have grown up with them and they have a special place in their hearts. Nostalgia's cool and everything. Take a film class.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. The originals are impressive because of their use of practical effects and what they were doing at the time. I would say both sets of films are dated at this point.
Yeah, of course. As this one will be eventually.
We're not going to crap all over the prequels any more than I just did. But, you know, full disclosure, we're not really fans of those, aside from Watto, who's pretty great.
Yeah. Hey, I'm a Toydarian. So what I feel about
your clock radio, EMFM.
I've tried a couple times to go back to those films. I think because in the absence of anything new Star Wars, you start digging around. You go to the expanded universe stuff. Now all of that is not canon anymore. What we really wanted was something that would simultaneously feel new and familiar. And I think in that way, The Force Awakens is incredibly strong. Now, there are some issues with it, and there are some things that I wasn't entirely crazy about, as you were. But overall, I sat in this theater and I cried multiple times, as you did. Cheered, laughed.
We sort of at one point awkwardly did like that.
I looked over at you a bunch of times, and we were kind of just head back, smiling, big face open.
I mean, we're big adult man babies, so that happens.
We're gonna break this down into a couple parts. We'll talk about the story a little bit. We'll talk about the heroes, the villains, and then some of the kind of extra stuff: the locations, the background characters, the music score, which was by John Williams and co. Phenomenal.
Can I just right off the bat though say that I think probably the best thing that has going for it was the element of surprise.
Yeah.
We went into this having seen. I think we both watched the first two trailers and that behind the scenes video, but then we kind of went on media blackout and we avoided the internet for 2 days before shooting this.
Right.
I think that going in and not really knowing what to expect, the fact that we saw the opening crawl and we didn't know what it was going to say.
Yeah.
Like right there, we were looking at each other like, oh, that's what this film is about. If you look at how the prequels were marketed, I believe the opening crawls were shown ahead of the movie. Like they were on the back of books and merchandise and stuff. The movie novelizations were in stores, 3 weeks before the actual movie was out.
Yeah.
People basically had it spoiled for them. In this case, JJ's kept a really tight lid on JJ and Disney.
Yeah, I
Kathleen
think
Kennedy and the kids.
What helps that
the whole
too
Lucas squad, is
that the prequels lack the element of surprise because we ultimately knew where they were all going to end up, which removes kind of the threat. And this is what almost every prequel is guilty of, where you go, oh my God, what's going to happen to the protagonist? Nothing. He'll be fine. He's in 3 movies or 2 movies, whatever it is down the line. So I think it did a great job of that. It sort of felt like you and I were kind of outright avoiding spoilers in that home stretch, right? They just kept doing TV spots and trailers, and I think you and I were trying to stay away from all of it. I actually got completely removed from social media, as you did, but seeing all this stuff that we had seen already within the context of the film still felt completely brand new.
Totally.
Even the shot of Rey coming in on her speeder, which we saw as the first scene in the original teaser trailer, in the movie was set to different footage or different music.
I want to point out that when people say spoilers, I think they often think like big, huge plot twists, like it was somebody's father, or whatever. You know, that's not what I mean here. I just mean just stuff that makes the movie not feel fresh.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that necessarily seeing an image will ruin the movie. I mean, depending on the image, but like the fact is, the opening shot of Rey and she's shooting along Jakku, and we see that Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Had they not used that shot in that trailer, that would have been an incredible reveal at the start of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't know that there was some form of Empire back there, I mean, they don't really write movies with the intention of being like, which part's going to go in the trailer?
Yeah,
that's not how that works. You know, there's gonna be kind of things that are gradually revealed in the story, but the idea is really you're kind of meant to see movies without having seen anything, but that just isn't how they're marketed at all. But I mean, like the fact that like this vehicle that looks sort of vaguely reminiscent of a land speeder. Like it's this kind of, if we'd never seen this in the trailers or the toys or whatever, and they just showed that on screen for the first time, we would have been like, oh, whoa. And that said, there was tons of stuff in there that was completely a surprise. But like, we're not crazy about the prequels, but that said, they are visually really dense.
Yeah.
There's a ton of stuff to look at in there, and Star Wars is this entirely fantastic world where, you know, even the most familiar thing, like a glass of milk, will be this strange alien milk that's blue. Where did they get blue milk? And like seeing little details like that is why the series holds up so well to like repeat watchings. And
we were very geeked out about a lot of the sort of the background stuff, the flora and fauna and stuff like that. So
and like the fact that we got to see this for the first time last night, is part of the reason that we're gonna go see it again this afternoon.
Yeah, it's pretty soon after this. So now you talked about how her speeder bike type of thing sort of felt familiar to Luke's thing. I felt that, and obviously JJ did a really good job of kind of evoking A New Hope in many ways. In some ways, it sort of felt like he took some of the best parts of A New Hope and the best parts of Empire. I wrote down a short plot synopsis for this movie, and tell me if it sounds familiar here. A daydreaming teenager on a barren sand planet meets a crazy old man who takes her to a dive bar while a group of good guys plan an attack on a big ball-shaped weapon. Sound familiar? That is the plot to A New Hope and also the plot to The Force Awakens. Yeah. Now, so many other things happen in that, including the crazy old man dying, and I want to talk about that real quick. This is the first time in a very long time that we've seen a Star Wars film end with a prominent protagonist death. Mm-hmm. Now, we had it in The Phantom Menace with Qui-Gon, who we had just barely gotten attached to. We saw it happen with Obi-Wan Kenobi. But other than that, it's never really happened. And this is the first time with Han Solo, again, spoilers, where it's happened to a prominent non-Jedi, a sort of regular person who's always been part of the series. You know, we never saw Lando die, we never saw Leia or Chewie die, even C-3PO got torn apart and put back together.
Yeah, he gets messed up left and right.
But think about the humans we saw die that were kind of on the good side. It's never really happened before.
I think that's really tying into something special they're doing here, where the Force is awakening. Like I think one of the biggest issues with the prequels is the fact that the Force is just the Jedi stuff is everywhere. It becomes commonplace. Like the amount of lightsabers that get thrown around, they get almost greedy with just the amount of Jedi flair there is.
Yeah,
and that's never been to me, been relatable about Star Wars. Like it's always been kind of iconic, the original trilogy, because of the kind of the used future, like the fact that you've got stuff that is spacey, sci-fi, futuristic stuff, but it's all like kind of crappy and old. It's all dirty and dusty. Like it starts out, it's about a farmer, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, you have these kind of relatable things, but it's like, yeah, they're like wizard knights in space, but when you've got 200 of them on screen, they're not really mysterious, you know? Like
it completely breaks the sort of illusion of
you look
of
at
sanctity to that.
Yeah, and you look at A New Hope, and they're like, what is this thing? Oh, well, this is a lightsaber.
Right.
And you're like, whoa. This is magic. And I think there's two of these people in the galaxy, and they're kind of doing that again.
And so we got back to that with this movie, which I really appreciated. But there were a few moments in this movie that alluded to there being kind of a new wave or a new era of Jedi. And I think that everyone is assuming that there's really only one left, and it's Luke Skywalker. And then we find out that Rey obviously has Force powers as well, but that there was a moment in time between Jedi and Force Awakens where Luke Skywalker was training a bunch of Padawans, and Kylo Ren was one of them, possibly.
Right. There's these guys, the Knights of Ren, apparently. Yeah. There's so much that's left hanging in this movie. I'm a little bit irked that shot of Kylo Ren and his other bad dude pals was shown in the trailer, because had that popped up on screen for a split second when it did, it would have been a total surprise, and it would be like, oh crap, there's more.
Right. Or the fact that it was a flashback, you know?
I think that episode 8 is going to have to rely on flashbacks a whole bunch. Max von Sydow, who's the first guy we see in the movie, who's that old guy who gives the map to BB-8 and Poe. He's a big deal actor. Like he's kind of a Sir Alec Guinness. Like he's kind of a guy who's got a lot of clout and a lot of respect, and to use him for that one scene and then cut him down with no plans of revisiting him, it seems really kind of odd.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's pretty likely that we're going to see some kind of like, well, here's what happened, you know?
So my theory with that is obviously Luke Skywalker is somewhere training all these Padawans, all these kids that he found, he brought together to fight. Or to learn the Force, to learn the ways of the Force, which was interesting because at the same time we learned that the Empire is basically kidnapping children and brainwashing them to make stormtroopers, which was Finn's origin story, which makes it even less. It's sort of ridiculous when so many of them blow up at the end of the movie because you don't just put out a Craigslist ads for that. You have to.
They've always been sort of, aside from episode 2, where they're like, yeah, they're all Tamira Morrison. They're kind of like, who are these guys? Where do they come from? In an expanded universe, they're like, oh, it's. I mean, if you've got a totalitarian dictatorship and they've got a strong military presence, they're probably going to be like, yeah, there's a draft. You gotta be in the military.
Yep.
But there's probably also something lucrative about it. Like Luke wants to go and join the academy when he's in A New Hope. Like he's like, there's something that draws people to it. With Finn, obviously, he's got a number. Like that's kind of odd. And he's obviously presumably not a clone.
No, I mean he was a child that was given a number and never a name.
There's a line in there about clones.
Yeah.
That definitely needs to have closer attention paid to it.
Yeah.
I think that what I was most fascinated about, we've got a lot of stuff that's very familiar. We've got the kind of the Skywalker clan, the Solo clan, all that stuff. The fact that Luke has vanished, the entire movie is them looking for Luke. I kind of like that. The fact that Luke is the MacGuffin, that's great.
Yeah, and that BB-8 is also part MacGuffin. He's got that map piece inside him.
I gasped at the opening crawl when it just said Luke Skywalker has vanished because that's such like a high stakes oh crap! Like
I thought it was kind of strange how it does start with that call and it says Luke Skywalker has vanished, and because he's gone, the Empire is like, we're back. Yeah. Like it seemed very odd that one person's absence would basically start the resurgence of an army, but that is a very powerful person, and I think knowing that what he was training and what he was creating. So my theory with that, by the way, is that he was training all these Padawans. Max von Sydow's character was probably helping him in some way. Kylo Ren and his friends have this uprising. They kill everyone. Rey is part of that group of people being trained, and Max's character saves her. And Luke disappears.
Now we see a lot of kind of mind reading, like probably the most kind of visceral, pulling of thoughts from heads, which I thought was kind of interesting. Does she have amnesia?
So I was going to ask you that. Maybe her mind was wiped. Like that's something it's not that it's never been addressed before. It just hasn't really been something that's been part of it. But then also straight up putting your hand on someone's head and reading their thoughts was way more prominent in this film, like you said. So
what did you think of Supreme Leader Snoke?
So I thought Snoke was kind of a disappointment in that he was so human-esque or human-like, in that it seems strange to me to project yourself at 65 feet tall. Like, because if that means that's how big his character is, seeing Leia projected in A New Hope means she would have been 4 inches tall. If we're going by that size.
I'm really curious about how they do this. If he's actually a giant dude, I think the hologram thing kind of like. I mean, there was an interview with Andy Serkis, and I was thinking it wouldn't be spoilery.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of overhyped myself based on what he said, but he was like, to do what we're doing with him, like he's CG because that's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like he's a big man, but like, I mean, dude, like Frank Oz put giant children in Indian in the cupboard. Like it's not that crazy to have practical effects of a giant dude.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't get like why you've got like this old man who's basically just got messed up face.
Even the Rancor was effectively a practical effect. And if you read that same interview, Andy Serkis said he didn't know what the character looked like, but he did know that he did all of the mocapping and voice work on a giant ladder pedestal thing. Did you read about that? So when he did all that, he was up very high and everyone was down very low, which leads a lot of people to think that that's the way that worked. You could kind of tell, even with Maz Kanata's character, that Lupita Nyong'o was sitting at that table with them.
Right.
There was a natural energy, which is like the improv that comes from stuff like that. Yeah. You'll never get from talking to a green screen. It'll never talk back to you.
Yeah, I thought Maz Kanata felt kind of like like a weird like Watto Yoda hybrid.
Yeah.
Like I'm not crazy about her character. I thought the performance is all right, but like her role is kind of like her whole pirate castle scene, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I need to kind of digest that some more. I was a little bit annoyed that it was just background stuff and that nothing really happened there. Like those two dudes with the guy who has like the red boomerang head and then the big fat guy he hangs out with who like Finn almost gets in their car. Like I thought some stuff was going to happen there. I thought they were going to do something.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to bail and there was going to be like an awkward scene where he's like hanging out with them or something.
It was definitely echoing the cantina scene, but the difference in the cantina scene is that the background characters interacted with the foreground characters almost constantly.
Right.
You're talking to the bartender. There's a fight with Ponda Baba and the doctor. Greedo shows up at the very end. I mean, these stormtroopers show up looking for the main characters. You didn't have a lot of that here. It was a little more one-dimensional.
Yeah. And same with Jabba's palace, which is like a ton of stuff happens there.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But like Maz Kanata was pretty much just like a plot point.
Yeah.
There's a lightsaber in the basement, which you seem really hung up on that nobody else found that.
It just seemed like, you know, like we go to a lot of bars in San Francisco that have a stairwell that go to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And if I was walking down to the bathroom and I was like, hey, I'm here at Pete's Tavern, and is that a treasure chest? Yeah. And I open it up and there's a lightsaber inside it. It just seems like the kind of thing that would have been found earlier. We didn't really see how deep those hallways went or how long that went on for. Maybe she was walking in a labyrinth for a little while. She did get a calling from this thing.
Yeah,
basically.
I mean, there's something magical there.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that BB-8's map, like everyone seems pretty pissed about the fact that like it's a segment of a map and they're all like, I don't know what to do with that. And then he meets up with R2 and they click together like a bad puzzle. Mm-hmm. I think we're thinking about this from a very Google Maps perspective and like, oh, they're droids, they're holographic, they're super mathy. But this is also a world where it's like they have information technologies, but there's still word of mouth about like, oh, you're Han Solo the smuggler? No, he's Han Solo the rebel general. Like there's this kind of old timey like there are still pirates.
Yeah.
They're pirates and knights and like they're wizards, you know. It's like there's a fantastical level. I think that this map is much more of like a treasure island type of map. Like
I totally agree.
These are not planets that all have like a GPS coordinate. It's kind of like, I mean, the whole thing in Star Wars that people always kind of screw up is that like the way the light speed stuff is supposed to work is that it's not that one ship is faster than the next. It's that to do hyperdrive around the galaxy, you have to have basically a really smart ship. So like Han Solo doing the Kessel Run in parsecs or whatever, which are their distance, not time.
Yeah,
it means that basically it's the shortest route by jumping between stars and stuff and dodging stuff. It's like an obstacle course, and we see that weird little course to Luke's planet. But maybe it's one of those things where it's like Never Never Land. It's follow the North Star and keep going till morning or whatever.
Yeah.
And I really like that. Like, oh yeah, 12 paces this direction, X marks the spot. But, you know, it's like that. It's the Captain Haddock stuff in Tintin where you're lining up like scrolls.
Exactly. And that was done with the assistance of R2-D2, who was basically in airplane mode the entire movie until he meets Rey for the first time. Or not meets, she kind of just walks by him and he's just like,
how's it going?
Yeah, he just kind of wakes up, has that interaction with BB-8, who is, a fantastic new character.
I like BB-8 a lot.
I think they did a really good job of this sort of passing the baton. We saw that actual symbolism many times in the trailers and in the film itself as somebody hands something to somebody else. And that's very symbolic of what happened, I think, a lot in this film. I think, so I wanted to ask you, like, how did you feel about the way the old characters were treated in comparison to introducing the new characters, sort of setting up the next 10 years? So we've got Leia, we've got Han, we've got C-3PO, R2-D2, Luke Skywalker, obviously, and then a couple of things like Admiral Akbar.
It was really refreshing.
Yeah.
I was a little bit disappointed that like there wasn't a tiny bit more fan service, like Yen Yun or Admiral Akbar or whatever. People still like cheered when they showed up on screen. But like, I mean, 3PO showing up was fantastic. I like laughed and cried back to back in that scene. Like that hit really hard. Like that.
Well, because he had that moment in Empire where he kind of got between Luke and Leia.
Also, like they could have totally done some stupid like "I love you, I know," but instead it was like, "You did your hair different.
Yep.
You got the same old jacket. That's a new jacket." Like I thought that was just a wonderful like. They got the characters felt like older versions of those characters. Yeah. They nailed that.
It was really great to see. I felt like Harrison Ford had, for somebody who kind of always resented the role of Han Solo, I feel like he jumped right back into it perfectly. It was a little bit of disbelief at the beginning to be like, oh man, that's Han. I have to remind myself that that's Han Solo. But he ended up doing something that to me felt like more range than anything Harrison Ford's done in a long time.
Yeah.
But that scene when C-3PO shows up and kind of gets in the way of them having their moment.
You might not have recognized me because
I got a weird arm now. Isn't that crazy? How are you guys doing? Like, it's great. And then
that was such a perfect, like, I mean, everybody remembers the big scene with the the carbonite freezing, the Gone with the Wind moment.
Yeah.
I love you, I know, but it's like really the scene that's packs the most punch is when he's like, I'm a nice guy. You're a scoundrel, whatever.
Yeah.
And then 3PO comes in. Oh, I'm here to ruin everything. I'm
Yep.
pain in the ass.
Yeah, that's just his thing,
Yeah.
So we got a little bit of that from him. Not enough, but you're juggling a lot of characters. We got a lot of Han. We got just enough Leia. I would have liked a little more. We didn't get much R2, and I think I'm okay with that.
No, we didn't get much R2. We got the tiniest glimmer of Luke, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. Like, I love that we know that there's a sequel to this. Like, there's no secret about the fact that this is going to have an immediate follow-up.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the fact that with The Phantom Menace, you can chop it out of that trilogy, and it doesn't really make that much of a difference.
It doesn't change a thing.
Like, that's awful. You know, this is, in this case, this is setting everything up. This felt like, in a good way, like The Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah.
In that the whole movie they're kind of spent solving this really kind of it's the first 2 acts of something.
Yep.
It's not a 3-act structure really. It's sort of like, hey, point A to point B. Oh, but there's a point C also.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's also with Disney now.
Yeah.
There's more than a point C. There's diagonals off of each of those, because now I feel like we're going to get more expanded universe content that's canon, more comics, more books. But we're also going to get movies. Like
they're bringing
if they
people
see
back in. You know? Like
this
is the Force. Like when you wake up in the morning, you're not immediately jumping out of bed and doing flips and calling up your alien friends. You kind of like you stretch. You know, you look in the mirror and you go, like that's kind of this is what this was doing. This is like, hey, remember Star Wars? We're bringing Star Wars back. Here's some stuff that's familiar. It's. I think the next one is going to be. I think it's going to be a lot more Jedi than Empire. I think that it's
I think
like
so
this
too.
one was. We say it mirrors A New Hope. It had a epic showdown between father and son on a big ass gantry above a pit.
It was definitely parts Empire as well.
There were a ton of callbacks and just visual kind of similarities. It had basically unresolved lightsaber fights. Like there was some people threw down, but it was also kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know what the hell you're doing.
Which I think was like very important for this film to establish characters and villains and stuff like that. But it was also, like you said, this is the start of something brand new. And this is for someone who's 10 today to have their moment where they can look back at this for the rest of their lives. Because I don't think it's totally normal to expect every 10-year-old in the world to do their homework on a bunch of movies from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Like, give them a new version to play with. So I think it did a really good job of that. And obviously, I was torn about this series of this set of movies for a long time, because I always said Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, C-3PO, Han Solo, these are eternal characters that at the end of Return of the Jedi had their big party, and then they went on to have many more adventures forever and scene. And instead it was like, well, they're going to open that back up, and that means they're going to start dying one by one.
Right.
And you see Chewbacca get almost mortally wounded. You see Han straight up killed by his son. And you see Leia, who's had more than enough tragedy and heartbreak, is now just like that poor woman. Like, if you think about what she's gone through in her life at this point, it's just horrific. Her brother's abandoned. Her family blew up.
This might have been like Jedi ends, and you get that whole montage of the Empire stuff getting toppled and everything. And it's kind of weird because this one starts up, and they're like, yeah, the Republic's in place, but there's the resistance against the First Order. So it's like, did the rebellion and the Empire effectively have kids, and the kids are fighting? Is that sort of what happened?
Yeah,
because
I think so.
We get this one totally throwaway shot that shows off the power of the Starkiller base, which is like, I mean, spoilers, it is 5 Death Stars in one.
Yeah.
It blows up 5 planets at once, which I thought was really stupid.
So
and that felt dumb. That felt bad.
Let's get into the villains then, because I think the Starkiller base is obviously the biggest one physically, but I also feel like they cannot possibly do another giant ball-shaped failure of a machine again.
I think
it just cannot be done.
They understand that, like, having that physical enemy, like having that fortress or that battle station or whatever, it's sort of cool, but it's kind of not, like, it's not that interesting,
Not
like,
this time
You've got to
around.
have an excuse for, a naval battle or aerial battle, whatever, and then like a ground battle, and then in the background you got a lightsaber fight, and this one, checked all those boxes. But as far as it being like a threatening kind of base thing, it was whatever.
I mean, the thing about Alderaan blowing up in A New Hope is that you don't see anyone on Alderaan. You never get to see a shot of anyone on Alderaan. You can go find that if you read the expanded universe stuff. But you do see Princess Leia standing on this ship deck watching her entire existence and everyone she knows and loves explode.
Right.
And there's something immensely powerful about that. This movie, on the other hand, you watch 5 non-named planets explode while a couple of people on one of them are just like, oh no.
But hold on. It's established that the Resistance is kind of basically like the military wing of the Republic, right? And there's this otherwise kind of like are we to assume that basically what we saw in The Force Awakens is an otherwise kind of like small kind of kerfuffle, like not like a huge fight to have, not like a big battle, like war isn't happening. This was kind of like there's some crazy guys who still love Darth Vader. Meanwhile, the rest of the Republic is totally peaceful and happy, but like, oh wait, they blew up all 5 planets of the Central Rim or whatever. Like, if this is them basically being like, oh, your Republic isn't there anymore, and therefore the Resistance is back to being something that really is super important and matters a lot. I kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that, because I went into this under the assumption that maybe, what happened? Like, what happened? Like, did the Republic, like, we don't know anything about the politics of this, which I'm kind of okay with, because really the prequels were too many politics.
Right.
But
yeah, I think it's hard to assume. I guess I went in wanting a little more exposition between Jedi and here to be like, how did this all happen? And like I said, it's Disney. I'm sure they'll find a way to fill all that out in alternate means. But the Starkiller base, to me, felt rushed as a threat, and it felt rushed as a designation, and its destruction felt rushed as well. We didn't get that Battle of Hoth, like, here's what's happening in the sky, here's what's happening on the ground, here's what's happening door to door. We didn't get that. We didn't even get the Battle of Endor of, like, here's what this fight looks like street level. All of that happened so quickly, and I know that's part of the way movies are made now, but, I mean, the rebellion was basically like, hey, if we go while the sun's out, we can blow this thing up. And they're like, all right, let's go do it. And then they just do it, and it's done. And it blows up, and tens of thousands of stormtroopers are killed. So are they going to rebuild from that? Like, we didn't get to see how they rebuilt from the last one.
We don't know how many other stormtroopers there are. Like, I guess it's kind of a weird divide. I like that the setup for this movie is this new trilogy is, it seems much more character based. It seems like a much smaller kind of centralized cast, which is sort of what the original trilogy had going for it. Prequels, obviously grand scale. You get a sense of how big the galaxy is, and apparently since like Yoda and Chewbacca went to college together, it's not that big. Everybody knows each other. If they're moving away from that to be like, oh, here are mysterious new characters who have some relation to somebody, that's cool, but like Star Wars established this galaxy, and then it's been gradually more and more fleshed out, and you can't keep adding to that galaxy without addressing the fact that it is the size that it is at this point. What do you do there? Did you just blow up all the important parts of the galaxy, and now it's back to being the kind of like no man's land, war-torn, galactic civil war from the original trilogy? Like, how far did that set them back?
Well, it's weird to have something...
on both attacks. Like, did Starkiller Base blowing up 5 planets totally level the Republic, and did the Resistance blowing up Starkiller Base and taking out their stormtroopers strike a big dent against the First Order? Is this a really small fight now? Like, how... We don't
know, because the thing is, as vast as a galaxy of its size is, hyperspeed means that you can get anywhere in 10 seconds. So it sort of makes that.
But they still got 56K internet.
Of course,
they don't have Google Maps. They got to do MapQuest. They got to print it out, and somebody loses one of the pages and stuffs it in their big rolling cell phone.
So of all the new villains in this movie, obviously Kylo Ren is the most interesting. We'll get through Phasma immediately because Phasma was a non-issue in this film.
No, I want to talk about this. So Lucas always hit very hard that there's a rule in like pulp storytelling in serials. If you don't see the villain die straight up, like, oh wow, he's dead, he's maybe still alive. And that's what people always leaned on for Boba Fett. That's the logic behind him getting out of the Sarlacc. That's kind of like...
And a lot of people have been calling Phasma the new Boba Fett, but the difference is that Boba Fett's first appearance in a film was incredibly interesting because he did something that was very important to the plot. Phasma was given nothing to chew on in this movie. She showed up, she pointed a gun at somebody pointed a gun at her, and then they threw her in a garbage disposal off camera.
I mean, once again, they've merchandised very heavily on her. It's Gwendolyn Christie. She's a badass. Everyone really kind of likes her. I think she's going to show up in 8. I think it's going to be like her and Hux, and they're going to be talking.
She's definitely showing up in 8.
I mean, she was Finn's commanding officer. Finn is effectively the guy who blew up the Death Star. Finn is Luke Skywalker now. Rey is doing her thing too. She's also Luke Skywalker. Everybody's Luke Skywalker, pretty much.
Finn is also part Han Solo, and Poe is part Han Solo. As the I like cocky fighter pilot.
That Poe and Finn are effectively, you took Han and Luke's characters from A New Hope and kind of remixed them. Just stripped them away in different directions.
There was a moment early in the film.
Also farm girl. Whatever.
There's a moment early in the film where Phasma demands to see Finn's blaster to count the lasers to make sure he killed some people. And we never get to see that moment.
Yeah.
We don't really get to see. We see a couple of dead ends with her, and I was a little disappointed about that.
I'm calling it right now because she was in charge of him like that.
Yeah.
She's brought in to be like, who is this guy? You were his boss.
Yep.
And she's going to be like, well, he threw me in a trash chute, so I'm going to kick his ass.
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know, like, everything will come and everything will get filled out with her and stuff like that, but I'm disappointed with how little they gave her to work with here. On the flip side, Kylo Ren is an incredibly fascinating villain. I hear some people mad at him because he's kind of this angsty teen. I think that's what works. So I wanted to talk about that real quick. Kylo Ren's origin story, basically being the son of divorced parents. One was a drug smuggler pirate who's never around. The other is a war survivor who watched her entire family blow up. You take those things and you modernize them and you remove the Force entirely, and you're going to create a messed up kid. Take that in 2015, just a regular kid on planet Earth with no Force, no Yoda, no lightsabers or anything like that. You take that person with that same exact parental situation and they're going to be messed up. You add to that the fact that they are basically apologists for one of the most evil faces to ever live in the galaxy, and turn them and give that a little bit of that cosplay edge of like.
I mean, I like this because people like villains, people like badasses, you know. And I think that Kylo Ren is interesting because he does take that that worship of somebody who's sort of like who's a badass and sort of flips it on its side. And it's like maybe you're attached to this because you got some stuff you need to work through.
Yeah.
I don't identify with him, but like this was interesting for me because so. My estranged father, who I met when I was 20, real life, like if we're gonna get personal here, is a mechanic, former like road manager for the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
My mom is a Buddhist nun / like hippie.
Yep.
Like she was always like, oh, Max, don't play those violent games, and the you know, it's always just kind of like sharing these like hippy dippy kind of things with me, and I'm like, I don't care. I hate my dad, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and there was a point when I was like 14 when I was like, I want to be a Sith Lord. I want to get revenge. I want to kill my dad. And she's like, why do you want to, you don't want to kill your dad. Just get over it. And, you know, long story short, like, I got to know the guy and he's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it was actually, this movie kind of hit close to home because it was familiar themes like that.
Right.
But I really like, he's fearful. Like, he's angsty and he's got his issues. And this is the first time I feel like they've really nailed, like, the dark side of the Force. Like everyone's always like, oh yeah, fear leads to the dark side, and like misery and anger, and like it's with Anakin they never really fully explore that.
No.
And in the original trilogy, the people who are on the dark side are just straight villains. So, you know, like Anakin's kind of having a redemption story.
You never truly buy Anakin's path to the dark side.
No.
Here, there's definitely a danger and fragility to this guy. There's also no one respects him. He's constantly being made fun of in this film. I mean, Hux and him and his relationship are basically going up to Snoke like two kids talking to a father, and they're like, "Yeah, well, he screwed up. No, he screwed up. Well, if it wasn't for him, we would have done this already." And Snoke's kind of looking down at them. They make fun of him for wearing the mask. There's everything is kind of his power is flickering right down to his lightsaber doesn't work. He's wounded. He's limping. He's young. Like he's not really. I mean, even when we see him tear apart his bedroom, basically being like, "I'm mad," and he slashes everything.
He just
it's a little kid throwing his pillows against the wall.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you know, smashing his PlayStation controller.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. 100%.
I died in Dark Souls. No, I really like. He reminds me as a character, kind of what's his name, Proteus in X-Men, who's Professor X and Moira McTaggart's kid.
Yep.
And basically, he's this super powerful dude who just his dad kind of pieced out and was like, I hate this. I'm angry, and like he goes on to some crazy large scale stuff. I
will say, as part of the one of the things I really wanted more from in this movie, and I know it sounds like we're being overly critical. We really both did love this film, but it's just we're going to be picking this thing apart up and down for the rest of our lives, basically. I actually wanted more variety in the vehicle design. We saw a little with Rey's speeder, and when we first saw that, I was like, man, we're gonna get so much new stuff. We kind of didn't. We got TIE fighters with stripes, and we got X-wings with blue wings, and that's about it. We didn't really see any walkers. There were no Y-wings.
I mean, I hope they cart that stuff out. I think, obviously the prequel trilogy kind of burned a lot of people in that front. They were like, hey, remember X-wings? We don't have them. We've got these ships that sort of look like X-wings, but they also look like TIE fighters.
Yep.
What are they? And you're like, all right, that's sort of familiar design-wise. They actually threw too many at you because, like,
they did. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the original trilogy, they were kind of working with what they had. They were working small. I'm cool with that. I really like this thing.
I feel like the first time I saw, an AT-AT walker or an AT-ST chicken walker, like those were really special moments. Even like speeder bikes, snow speeders, like all of those things were interesting in their own way, and a lot of them had sort of like real world identities to them. And this movie reduced all of those fights to basically TIE fighters and X-wings. We saw that Kylo Ren came in this cool new like Imperial ship with the wings flipped up.
I mean, it's
that
kind of
stuff.
A
I really
Tidarium
like.
shuttle and a big big TIE fighter.
And there was that large scope shot where Hux is speaking to the huge crowd, and I'm trying to, and I can't wait to see it again later because I feel like there were walkers in the corner, but we didn't get to see any of them.
One of the most interesting things is watching Empire and Jedi side by side, and knowing that at the end of Jedi or at the end of Empire, they knew they were going to be making a sequel. They have this cliffhanger ending. That's a reality. In the same way that everybody knows that there's going to be an episode 8, there's going to be another movie. It's coming really soon. They probably are. They're working away on it right now. They set stuff up in this one that I thought, like Luke gets his hand cut off at the end of Empire, and he finds out that Vader's his father, and then it's just all this down ending. They fix his hand at the end of the movie, which really takes. I mean, it is like really pulling a punch there. Like it's like, why don't you just show him with it bandaged? And he's on the medical frigate, and he's like, I don't have a hand.
Yep.
And then you're like, what are you gonna do? And then meanwhile, Jedi starts, and he's got a new lightsaber, which is sort of a surprise. But there's absolutely no explanation of where he got it until like the third act, when it's like, oh, you've reconstructed. Well, I guess he built it instead of went and bought one somewhere.
Right.
In this case, I mean, they kind of left a lot of stuff hanging. We're still like, what? Who are these people? What's going on? You know, like. And I really appreciate that. Like
I do too.
I like that. I mean, are we like we saw Kylo Ren get his face all messed up?
Yeah, and did he lose a hand or a part? Something got cut off.
Stabbed, kind of. I mean, he's going to come back as a cyborg. Is Phasma going to show up in like a new outfit? Like, what's going to be new in the next one? Like, what's going to be cool and exciting?
Phasma's going to have a banana peel on her head, and that's going to be it from the garbage can.
They put me in the trash.
So one of the things you and I were geeking out about, and we always have, if you look at our desks at work, we're covered in Star Wars toys, but there are a lot. We've got your. I don't even think I have a Luke Skywalker on my desk, or I think I have one, but I have a lot of weird characters. It's why I love Jabba's palace. It's why I love Return of the Jedi. All the Cantina aliens, and I think this movie did a pretty good job of that stuff too. We saw merchandising early on for all these characters that got half of a second of film time in this movie, which is pretty par for the course for Star Wars, right? There was PZ-4CO, that blue robot. We had the Guavian Enforcers who showed up with those guys from the raid that weird scene outside of the Millennium Falcon where there's that ball monster.
It's kind of a waste of those guys from the raid.
Yeah,
like they kind of did that. I mean, this thing happens in casting where you'll try to cover all your bases and get everybody from every different kind of end of the spectrum you can. X-Men is a great example of this because they were like, okay, let's cast somebody from every little circle. You had like Tyler Mane, who's a wrestler. You have Hugh Jackman, who's from Broadway. And you're going to get like all these people who maybe typically didn't really care about it. Like wrestling fans, maybe they weren't X-Men fans, and Broadway fans, maybe they weren't X-Men fans. And then you get Halle Berry, who's like a respected actress, and Xavier, who's in Star Trek.
Yeah.
I'm getting off the beaten path here, but like, I feel like the casting here was kind of the same deal.
Yeah.
And they were actually, I remember episode 2 was about to come out, and like early on, it was thought that Jet Li was going to play Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And I went out and I was like, I should probably watch Lethal Weapon 4 to get a sense of this Jet Li guy.
Yep.
And then they were like, it's actually Tamira Morrison. And I'm like, I'm not watching Whale Rider. I don't care.
It's a child.
Yeah.
And also that we got to see some really cool little things like around the edges there, where one of the things you and I kind of geeked out about at the same time, just a little thing, is Rey gets that food packet and puts a drop of water on it and it becomes a Hot Pocket.
That was the
basically.
blue milk.
Yeah, that was the blue milk.
Scene, yeah.
And I love little things like that because that's Star Wars to me. Something that's sort of just like, well, I know what it's like to drink water and eat food, but she's going to spin this around and do something a little different with it.
Yeah, the worst thing this movie had going for it is it felt a little bit rushed, it felt like they were trying to cover a lot of bases at once.
Yeah.
But that said, like, if they jammed, basically fan service for A New Hope and Empire into one movie in hopes of kind of paving the way for whatever comes next that's kind of new and exciting, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, they didn't outright state a lot of the names of the new planets, which I think they've been pretty good with in the original trilogy. But this one, we saw a lot of new stuff, and a lot of it still felt familiar too. There's a sand planet, there's a snow planet, there's a Yavin-esque planet that's kind of beautiful, Utopia.
I also like that, like you're annoyed that the final scene, like Luke's weird mystery planet, that there weren't enough critters there.
Yeah,
there could have been more critters on all these planets, you know. But I kind of like that they kept it. Like if you go hiking, you don't see 18 animals. Like if you go to like the jungle, like you might see a weird snake here and there.
Yeah.
But like you typically, unless you're just dropped in the middle of everything, it's not like this like it's not like going to a bunch of Pokemon everywhere. You know?
Sure. Yeah, let's head right to realism now in the movie about wizards and aliens.
Well, I mean, like I like that it feels more grounded. And you look at episode 1,
yeah.
and it's kind of it beats you over the head with it.
It's too much.
Those final scenes from Revenge of the Sith, where there's just like, oh, it's the crazy plant planet. Remember that one? All right, never mind. Oh, you remember the lava planet? Well, there's crazy guys who surf on the lava. Okay, and you're like,
even the special edition recuts of the original trilogy were like, hey, here's that scene. Remember that? Here's a bunch of rats.
Yeah.
There's a guy lifting a rod.
Yeah.
Like it was actually unnecessary. So I guess I'm with you on that.
I mean, I liked it. It was very like. There's parts of this movie that felt more rooted in fantasy than in sci-fi, which is really good. Like going to Luke's little weird retreat, and there's just a bunch of steps, and you get to the top, and there's like a little stool for meditating on, and some old books, and you're like, I don't know what those are.
The J.J. Abrams Lost Island that he had to throw in there. I did love that fat elephant with the weird butt that had that shared the watering hole with Finn. I thought it was a great moment.
The big weird pig man.
Things like that were really cool. And like we said, there's going to be more movies and books and everything to spin all this out. I'm a little hesitant to buy any more toys of side characters right now. I was really into the design and story behind Ello Asti, who's the kind of Beastie Boys inspired alien. Hello Nasty. It says "License to Ill" on his head in
Aurebesh.
In Aurebesh, and he got murdered in a tunnel. I don't think he had maybe one line in the movie, which was totally inhuman for some reason.
I was really annoyed at that guy from Heroes who kept showing up.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a Star Wars face. That's like a dumb thing to say, but it felt just like you might as well put Kevin James in there.
Yeah.
Like that
100%.
took me out of it so much. I was like, just stop.
Yep.
Just get the hell out of here.
There was also with the Asian guy from Lost was in there. I'm totally forgetting their names. We're not good at this stuff. If he had an alien name, I would have remembered it because I'm stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, absolutely love this movie. It was such a thrill to see it opening night in San Francisco at this new theater called the Alamo that opened specifically for this. People are getting
I think they
interviewed
plan on showing other movies too, but
eventually, if you go to their website at this point in time, it just shows Force Awakens posters. Maybe they'll just do that forever until they go out of business. But yeah, it was awesome seeing this movie with you, man, and I can't wait to do it again today.
I hope you guys have seen this. Otherwise, this is probably a real awful video for you to watch.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah, tell us your theories and who is Rey? Who are these people?
I mean, if you hated it, tell us why you hated it, and maybe don't argue. Maybe let's all join together over something for once and have a nice time in the comments here.
Does Luke have a wife? Maybe Luke has a wife.
Maybe he has a snake wife like Yoda did.
Yoda
was married to a snake.
A lot of romance.
That's why it was in his house all the time.
Yep. If you buy a Yoda toy, it comes with a snake.
And there's a scene in Empire where the snake goes into the X-Wing's engine and Luke has to take it out. And so you have to stay here with your husband. On that note, we're wrapping this up. We'll be back soon enough for Up at Noon live
early
normally
January.
in the way we normally do it, which is slightly more organized, kind of, I guess. On that note, I hope you guys all have a wonderful, happy New Year, happy holidays, and may the Force be with you.